The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game, show about short video games, games that respect your time. My name is Nate Heininger, and I am joined this week by one spiky co-host.
It's me, Spiky Shane.
And this week, we are going to be talking about Isle of Arrows, a game that touches on multiple genres, but first and foremost is a tower defense game.
Gotta love a title. I love arrows. It's Isle of Arrows.
What did I say? Did I say I love arrows?
No, it just sounds like that. Whenever I say it, I sound like I'm saying I love arrows.
I love arrows. Well, that would be a great name for this game too. I love arrows. Yeah, Isle of Arrows. Island of Arrows. This is a game developed by Daniel Lutz, a single developer, a one-person game developer. We love that on this show under the name Grid Pop.
And he goes by Grid Pop on there. He's got another game that I'm intrigued by his other game on the Grid Pop page, which is called Deco. Apparently available only in Canada. It's only on the Canadian iOS App Store. Bring it to me. I'd like to give it a try after trying Isle of Arrows. But the interesting thing about Daniel Lutz to me is he is formerly of Square Enix. Did you play either Hitman Go or Lara Croft Go?
I did. I played Lara Croft Go. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So he was the director on those, and you can kind of see the same design aesthetic. I think I didn't actually play those, so I'm curious to see how they're similar from you.
I would say very, very similar aesthetic. And very similar, like they look and feel very similar. Everything's on a grid. You're looking at like an isometric island. You know, there's a huge crossover in the design of these games, although the actual gameplay is incredibly different. So Isle of Arrows is available on Steam and the App Store and Google Play. I played it on my iPhone. Great one-handed iPhone game. Shane, what did you play it on?
I played it on iPad. I actually played it a little bit of both on my iPhone and my iPad. If I have one wish for this game, I wish it would sync my progress between the two using Game Center or something like that. I really liked it on iPad, though, because just you have a nice view of the island without having to scroll very much. So very nice, a very relaxing game to kind of kick back and play. But iPhone also really, really good way to play the game.
Yeah, I thought it was great on iPhone, though. I ran into the exact same thing, Shane. I was like, I bet this game is even better on iPad, so you can get that big lens, that big view of your islands. And I opened it up, and it said logged into Game Center. And so I thought, great. And then, no, there was no syncing. And progress isn't the name of the game here. There's a progress mechanic that we're going to talk about. But it's not like something where you would spend, you'd maybe lose dozens of hours by it not transferring over, but it still would be nice. So hopefully, a one-person development team, like those sorts of things are usually sort of secondary features that hopefully will come down the line. But hey, before we get too far into this game, we've been trying to do a new segment on the show at the start, and I want to honor that. And so taking a question for you, Shane. So I love tower defense games, but I don't really play them that much. There's not a lot of what I have found to be like interesting, available tower defense games that go above and beyond sort of what I think we all played a ton of back in like the Flash days and little sort of, shareware or shovelware iPhone games, full of purchases and pay to win sort of things. And this game, like, not that at all. A great price for a great complete game that I absolutely love, with some really interesting and new tower defense mechanics that I've not really seen before. So it had me thinking, what other types of genres or game types that you haven't seen recently or utilized effectively that you'd like to see redone or reused now?
So I think that thinking this over, there's one that's almost completely extinct, and that is light gun games.
Nice.
Light gun games are like still somewhat present in the arcade, and there are some light gun games that still come out. Like I did a quick Google search here, and it turns out a game called Bang Bang Pew Pew came out in 2021. I did not know about this, but the thing about light gun games, like,
great name.
Apart from the like actual technology changing of screens, which really kind of threw them out for a while. You know, they didn't really work on a LCD screen. They kind of came back with some things on like the Wii where you'd use the Wiimote and stuff like that, but none of that like really worked that well. I think there have been some attempts at similar kinds of games on like the Switch with the little Joy-Con or whatever, but the technology is really hard to nail, I guess, for and you really you need an even more complicated peripheral these days because you can't just do the actual light-based thing, right?
Right.
So without a CRT. So I would like to see something that is compelling enough to make me buy a plastic gun to play it with. And I really would like to see what you can do with the size of TVs today, because my TV today is absolutely gigantic compared to any of the TVs that I had back when light gun games were popular.
Yeah.
You know, I want to stand like inches away from my like gigantic OLED and
Big
just
flex.
like, oh yeah, you know. And I think if there is a natural successor to light gun games that I will accept that is not actually a light gun game, it would be like really solid VR shooters.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is VR is really what you're going to get now. I don't know that there's a lot of development in like a handheld peripheral like that. Although, I mean, I've been pretty peripheral avoided. You know, I've avoided peripherals for a while. I really hate just having like piles of plastic stuff in my entertainment center. But I agree with you. If you could make something that was like a satisfying target, you know, because I do enjoy those games, and you're right, at the arcade when I do go, that is a game that I like to pick up. That's what
I go for.
I'm the opposite of a hunter in real life. I want nothing to do with it, but I like those big buck shooter games. You know, they're fun. Or the like just hordes of zombies coming at the screen, and you've got to shoot the screen and then shoot the ammo types or shoot the gun pickups. Like, those are fun.
This reminds me to bubble back up for the podcast. There's a game I really want to play in VR. I know I'm now maybe the only VR headset owner for at least for the, you know, meta version or whatever on the podcast. But there's a game called Pistol Whip that combines a shooting game with a rhythm game, and if you just kind of have to see it to understand what it's like. There's like imagine like walking down an Old West like main drag, you know, past the saloon or whatever, and there's like guys leaning out of every window to shoot at you, and you have to shoot them on the beat.
That sounds fantastic, actually.
So, and it's you should look it up. It's got a pretty unique visual style as well. Very kind of lots of use of silhouettes and things like that. And there's different levels to it. It's not all there's a lot of like sci-fi levels, and I think I saw, maybe I'm misremembering, I think I saw like a James Bond like
Okay.
intro looking version, the dun 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 dun, like
Yeah.
the silhouettes and stuff. So that looks pretty cool to me. Maybe that'll scratch the itch. But hey, how about you? What's your?
Well, I will say, on your point with VR, like I am very interested in PlayStation's new or upcoming, PSVR 2. In general, like I really enjoy when I've had the opportunity to play PSVR. I just I don't have one, and I haven't really had the space in my house to fit one in a way that wouldn't result in me just like punching walls and stuff.
I should give you my PSVR is what I should do. I have the original PSVR, and speaking of light guns, I have the there's this thing that looks like a big rod made of PVC that is a gun controller for PSVR, and so far as I'm aware, like one worthwhile game came out for that controller, and it was basically like Shoot the Bugs, the game.
See, that's my problem with peripherals, though. So now you've got this big gun thing that was maybe useful for one game. But, I did enjoy like Super Hot VR is a fantastic experience. So there's definitely some that I've enjoyed, but I want to get the new one eventually too, because it seems like it's going to be a pretty big improvement. But to the original question, this game made me think about it, but I've also been playing, we just got Mario Party Superstars for the Switch to play. I'll say it was to play with our kid, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I was just as excited to play it. I love the Mario Party franchise, and I haven't played one since the Wii Mario Party. I don't remember which one that is. It was like 4 or something like that. But anyway,
I've never gotten into Mario Party.
Oh, I love it. I mean, if you like mini games, which I do, it's really all it is. It's a vessel for feeding you mini games. But the sort of wrap mechanic, the thing that it's all built around, is really what I think fits for this question, is that the whole thing takes place on a board game. It is like a Mario board game, and then the outcomes of the board game result in you playing mini games. And the tower defense game that we're going to talk about today has a lot of qualities that come from board games. And I would just love to see more games that just right on the nose, this is a board game, not necessarily a video game port of a board game, even though those can be fun and good. I like seeing video games that are just directly visualizing and utilizing some core mechanics of board games. Like in Mario Party, you roll a die and you move however many spaces you rolled on that die, and then what you land on will determine a bunch of different outcomes, right? And I just don't really see that as much. I can't think of any board games that really, or video games that have that sort of like roll a die to see how much you move, like you're playing Monopoly or Sorry or something like that. And this game has tower. I Love Arrows has a tile drawing and tile placement mechanic that is straight out of Carcassonne, which we both love. And we played Carta. I don't know, somewhere between the last 6 months to 3 years, we played a game called Carta, which was a tile placement game that was, a lot like Carcassonne, but it was more narrative. So anyway, I really like video games that utilize board game mechanics, and I'd love to see more of that. And I would just love to see more tower defense games that do something interesting. So let's dive in then. Let's actually talk about this tower defense game.
This is a unique one. I really I forget where I saw this. I know this was something I kind of recommended for the podcast. I think I actually saw it on Mastodon. So
nice.
Thanks, Mastodon. But Isle of Arrows is a very traditional tower defense game combined with a tile placement game. In most tower defense games, you have a map, and on that map there are places where you can build towers using money or other gems or other resources, whatever. And you have to place those so that, each time you start a new wave of enemies, that those enemies will charge towards your home base or wherever that is. And, enemies getting to the end of the path will either let you lose or you'll lose lives or whatever. And the towers are shooting at the enemies. You upgrade the towers, things like that. This game takes that kind of basic formula, and which is a great formula. It remains one of my favorite kind of mobile games.
Super satisfying.
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, like, it goes back to like Field Runners was, I think, the first big one I got really into. That was like one of the very first iOS games. Lately, I've been playing with my son a lot of Bloons TD6 on Apple Arcade. I don't know if you know that one. That's the one with the monkeys and the balloons. But this one kind of starts you off with a very, very simple map, because this has two phases. There's your tower defense phase where you have waves of enemies, and there's a separate phase of laying tiles in between the tower defense phases. And when you're in that phase, you are like very similar to Carcassonne. It's take a tile, place a tile, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way that you explore past that, like, and the way it kind of gets more complex, is this game has a fairly complicated system of like resources that you're managing. There's like gold, there's bombs and bridges, and am I missing anything? Is it gold, bombs, and bridges?
Gold, bombs, and bridges. I mean, really, what more could you need in life? Gold, bombs, and then your health, of course, which
and yes, of course,
is a health indicator. And so, every time you pull a tile, you have the opportunity to place it. You can skip a tile if it doesn't have a nice spot. But
this is my favorite thing, because the tiles are free. It's skipping or passing on a tile or drawing a new tile that costs you gold. And so, the economy of the game is very, very tight.
Yes.
So the variety of the different cards is very interesting as well. There's even some cards that aren't tiles. There's like events, and
encounters, relics, bonuses. Yeah, there's a lot of variety that create a really interesting balance. Because another thing that I enjoy about this game is that I think it's kind of difficult. I think a lot of times these tower defense games, there's sort of a exponential growth where it might be a little difficult at the beginning, but once you really get a good system set up, it becomes sort of a snowball thing where you become a total powerhouse, and it's really not a challenge anymore. It can still be fun because it's fun to be that sort of powerhouse and create like a maze of hell for whatever the things are that are attacking your base. But they usually get kind of easier the further they go along. This one gets more challenging the further it goes along, and they do some really interesting things to increase that challenge. But before we get into that, I think, to kind of a few things that I don't think we've really touched on yet that make this even more complicated is that, so what you're looking at when you're playing is you're seeing a floating island that's at a sort of 3/4 perspective. So you're seeing the top of the land and then everything down below it, sort of like, again, a floating island. And it's on a very tight grid. And that island is actually pretty small to begin with. It's maybe like 6 squares by 6 squares across.
It's like 7 by 7, but like rounded off a little bit on the corners, so it's more or less kind of boxy round. And you have on that island a little bit of road and a single arrow tile, a single arrow tower. And you always can see that. I love the decision to always make the next tile
visible.
Yeah, you can always see what you would get if you on the next round or whatever.
Yeah, so
when you see all that at once,
when you're in the build phase, you have a tile that's been given to you for free. It may be a arrow tower. It'll be, any version of the towers. There's a lot of different versions of the towers. And then it also might be a road piece, where that's a thing I think that is kind of unique to this game too. You are building the path that the enemies are going to go down. And so you may place that road piece to extend the path that the enemies have to go down, or you will find a great spot to put that tower. And that's your one free
advancement. Like all the tiles have to touch. You can't place them like off in the corner. And you can't have the road like not like be interrupted or dead end. So there's rules about how you can place the tiles. But in most tower defense games, one of the most obvious important strategies is look for places where you can really maximize the use of your most powerful towers by putting them somewhere where things are going to be going all the way around them or looping around them, looping past them, or they're going to have lots of available targets. And you do that by, finding a spot where the path makes a little horseshoe shape or whatever, stick it in the middle. In this, because you're building the tower, you have so many more choices to maximize the usefulness of the towers that you place compared to a regular tower defense.
Yeah, so you can sort of plan out. You see like, all right, I've got this arrow tower here. It attacks in a 3x3 grid. So all of the tiles that are directly adjacent, including the corners to that tower. That's your basic tower. And so you really want to build your road to perfectly wind right around that tower so all of its attack spaces are being utilized. But you don't know what tiles you're going to get. It might be 5-6 tiles before you get exactly that corner road piece that you need. And so every round you're making this decision. Do I spend the 2 gold to skip to the next tile and play that? Or do I start the next wave of enemies, which will move me to the next tile on the carousel for free, but I have to survive that wave. And it's a really interesting balance. And you accrue money. There's a lot of different modes and variants in this game, but the base way that you accrue money is by killing enemies and surviving waves. And the more money you make increases the amount of money you make, if that makes sense.
It's like you're getting interest on the amount of gold you have. Like if you have up to something like 10, you're going to get 1 gold at the end of the round. And if you get to 20, you're going to get 2 golds at the end of the round. And you can get up to as much as 4 gold at the end of the round. And it's worth mentioning that skipping a tile costs 2. So by holding on to and not spending your gold up to a point, you are giving yourself access to more cards, more tiles. And the thing that I want to call out here about the economy and those tiles and the gold is that in most tower defense games, you upgrade a big part of it is upgrading your towers and knowing when to like level them up or, choose different abilities for them. And you're doing that by usually spending your gold or whatever that equivalent is. And in this, there's none of that. The towers don't upgrade. Sometimes there are towers that have special abilities, and those are all based around the placement of the tiles and things that are adjacent to them. So, for example, there's a tavern tile that's a simple one you get early in the game that increases the attack speed of adjacent archery towers, right? Very useful, but it means you have to start really playing to the arrangement of the little city that you're building. That's what I really love about the tile placement element of this game is you're building this lovely little functional city where there's lots of cute little buildings that are all kind of helping optimize the overall deadliness of your towers.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful game. I mean, it's kind of just fun to like look over the path that you've built and because if you're really being optimal, you're ending up with this really winding path that's often circling around itself and making it where everything is really as tightly packed and winding as possible. So every tower is utilized to its most possible degree. And it's really nice looking. And then we talked about earlier that this game gets exponentially more difficult in an interesting way. Another thing it does that I've never seen in a tower defense game do, which this sort of style allows it to do, is at the 20th wave, there's 40 total waves. At the 20th wave, suddenly, boom, there's a new spawn point for enemies on an entirely separate part of your island. You don't get any new resources. There's no new benefits to you as the player. You just now have 2 tower defense situations to deal with.
And I hate it.
And it becomes now
so hard.
Okay, I've got it. Great. I've got an arrow tower. Awesome. Which path needs it the most? And then, if that's not hard enough, at wave 30, a third one populates.
Yeah.
And so really like the best, they populate close, but not too close to your existing island. I think it's totally random. I could find no way of predicting where they were going to come from.
But you can't connect it up with, you can like line it up a little bit with your existing city in a way that's like a little bit beneficial, but I kept wanting to be like, okay, I'll just have these roads go together so that all my towers are shooting the same guys. Nope.
No, you cannot connect the roads. I thought that too. Like, have them feed into my broader path. No, you just end up with 3 different micro tower defense worlds that you're building. And yeah, I think the most optimal play is like, so every round, as you'd expect, the amount of enemies and the enemy types that are coming out increases. So your first tower defense situation, I don't know what to call them, like module, your first one that you've been building is always going to be the most challenging one. By the end of the game, it's going to have the most amount of enemies. And then the second one that came is going to be, it only has 20 rounds of escalation. So it's going to end up pretty strong, but it's never going to be as strong as the first one. And then the third one is really ultimately going to be a relatively small amount of enemies, but it's still just another factor to deal with.
But I definitely had games where many times where that first kind of path that I built, I had it like on lockdown.
Yeah.
It was set, I was like, if I don't place another tile on this for the whole rest of the game, I'll be fine. I've got waves of fire sweeping through and annihilating however many bad guys you want to throw at me. But the other one, and now all the good tiles have dried up.
The second one is always my problem too, but I will say you can't ignore the first one though, because it does seem like I would imagine if you really dug in and looked at the balancing, I bet that the scale of escalation of the enemies for the middle rounds probably slows down a little bit on the first wave or on the first section, because that gives you a little bit of time to build up the second one. But if you're ignoring the first one, those last 5 waves for winning the game are really heavy in that first tower defense module. So you really have to have made sure that you were at least adding something over there, because if it was good for you at wave 25, it will not be good for you at wave 35. And you only have 10 hit points, and it cannot increase above 10. There's a variety of things that you can do that will ultimately result in you getting more health, but all you can get is 10. So going back a little bit, because we kind of talk about health management, talking about the resource management of this game is really interesting and one of the bigger challenges of it. Besides managing your health and besides managing the tiles, you're also managing really your ability to build in the space that you have. So these islands, as we talked about, are really small, like 7 squares by 7 squares. And when the game is done, your island is, it's going to be all over the place. It's not going to be a perfect square or anything close to that, but it's probably hundreds of total squares, right, that have expanded, and you've built your whole little empire on top of it. And the way you do that is one of 2 ways. One, you can just build off of your island into space if you have a bridge, and it costs one bridge for every individual tile that you're going to build off of the island. And that adds up quickly. You're not getting a ton of bridges. There's, I don't know, you start with one or two, and you get them through purchasing them in an event or acquiring them through a couple different building encounters. But it's not like you have a ton of them. Many games you might go through with only having like 4 or 5 of them. So they're really to be used sparingly. The other way to build outside of your island is to actually expand the island itself, which is by placing flags. Flags are a tile that show up just like any other tile in your little tile carousel. And what they do is when you put them down, they themselves take up a space, which is annoying because they don't do anything. They just sit there and block your roads and block places for your towers to go. But they expand the island. They create new ground. And so it is an essential part of this game is playing flags and ideally kind of building out the island ahead of where you're trying to go. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be stuck, and you're either going to be using bridges, which is expensive, or just not really being able to play and hoping to spend money and skip through tiles till you find what you would like. And that is, again, this is a major part of this game, is this sort of like land management, which maybe doesn't sound super fun when we're explaining it, but it's actually pretty satisfying to expand your island and create this sort of like, you know, maze of death.
It really is the thing that makes the tile placement, or especially the placement of your path and your road, really interesting, because, like, you know, the fact that it's a tower defense game where you get to kind of draw your own path, well, like, there's an answer to why wouldn't you just make a zigzag snake pattern so that every tile, every tower that you place can like do the maximum damage and have maximum effect. Like, the reason is you're really hemmed in by the size of this island and forced to grow it. And, you know, not to mention alongside the flags, this is actually even true of many of the flag tiles. Lots of the tiles that you place don't take up a single square. They take up multiple squares. And a lot of them have these like useless water tiles as part of them.
Yeah.
That so like managing the actual space that you have to grow is a really important strategy in this game, and very strategic, and takes a lot of planning. And that's one of the coolest things about it.
Yeah, you'll spend like, all right, I've got my ideal path. I've got this cannon tower here, and I've got this arrow tower over here. And what I really want to do is I want to have my road curl around the cannon tower and then double back around the arrow tower, so that 8 of the 9 spaces for both of these towers, 8 of the 9 attack spaces, or I guess all 8 of the attack spaces for both towers are fully utilized. But okay, cool. That sounds great. But now I have to hope in my little tile carousel I get exactly those specific tiles that I need, and that they don't have any water on them, because I can't place them in a tightly wound grid if they have any water on them, because there's no space for it. And so what actually ends up happening is you're like, all right, here's my plan. And then 20 minutes later, like, well, all right, I kind of got there, and
15 tiles go by and you're waiting for a corner piece. And
exactly. Yeah. And so you end up having to sort of improv, like, well, okay, I wanted to go left here, but the tile I got was actually they'll do like multiple road pieces. It'll be a single straight and then a left turn. So, okay, I still got to go left, but I'm a little further down the road than I thought I would be. Or I really needed to keep my road going. So I just went right instead. So, all right, a whole new game plan. Because as Shane said before, you can't just place tiles out in space. They have to be touching another tile you've played. So you can't like pre-build this perfect road and then just slot in tiles as you get them. Everything has to be touching each other. You can a little bit if you've like your world is big enough and you truly plan out where you're going. You can build a road on the other side of your towers because eventually you're going to wrap around and get there. So like you can be strategic with your tile placement, but for the most part, you're just sort of dealing with what you get. And like Shane said,
the best strategy for me was to try to build my whole city in the form of a large spiral so that I could always have some ability to build ahead because, I'm following back the same path. And, added bonus, I can wend my road back past towers that I've already placed and get that extra damage for free.
Yeah, I ultimately had the same thing. Is you really want a nice, perfect spiral, but the odds of you being able to create that perfect spiral is pretty low. So it ends up being sort of like a bulbous spiral as it whips out and around and out and around. Mm-hmm. And once a tile is placed, it is set. The only way you can get rid of a tile is if you use one of your other resources, which is a bomb, and it allows you to place a tile on top of another tile. And I think bombs are a little bit more available than bridges, though it does depend on the game mode that you're playing, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you don't have a lot of these bombs, and you need to be pretty strategic with them. And so most of the time, unfortunately, it ends up being used for like, well, I built this flag, and this flag had a water piece connected to it. And I had to build that flag right here because I needed to extend the island because that's the way my road is going. And now I need to put a road on top of that flag. And it's just going to kill the flag and put a road there. Or it's going to kill the water tile and it's going to put a road there or whatever. It's just more this like logistical, I'm just trying to build my road in the way I want it to go. Sometimes, though, you can use it like if things are going really well, if you get like a cannon tower, which is generally better than an arrow tower, you might choose to blow up your like perfectly positioned arrow tower to put that cannon tower there instead and maximize its usage. But for the most part, you're probably finding just another place for that cannon tower. And bombs, I found, were mostly for building.
In terms of the like strategy, managing all of the different resources like simultaneously makes for a really fun challenge. The bombs are incredibly useful. Just because if you are trying to follow that like loop back on yourself strategy, there's definitely going to be times where like maybe I had a ice trap tower early on, but if I can drop a loop tower there, I can hit tons of spaces, stuff like that. But let's talk for strategy for a little bit, because I think when people get started in this game, the onboarding process is actually pretty challenging. Like, I think it's a pretty steep learning curve in the game. We mentioned doing the spiral thing. I think that would be a helpful tip for people. Another one I would share would be that as you're like early on in the game, it really pays off to gather enough money to be getting like at least 2 or 3 gold every turn, because it gets you an additional tile every turn, and the getting more tiles is a huge benefit. Later in the game, maybe you actually want to lay down a ton of tiles and dump your gold into tiles on like a new path. And as you get into that situation, like let me think. I've got a few other tips. Let me have to rack my brain.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think ultimately, the tile placement's the biggest one, but I think it's pretty easy to figure out pretty quickly. Like, I need to maximize the usage of my towers. Every tower is valuable, and you want as many of its attack spaces utilized. So I think that's pretty obvious. I think that like the economy curve in this game is the thing that takes a while to learn. And I'd echo what Shane is saying, which is I would highly recommend as little as possible spending gold for the first like 15 to 20 turns. Like you might get into a spot where you have to do that, but I'm really trying to save my money until much later in the game when my map is even more convoluted and more complicated and I'm dealing with enemies on multiple fronts. I really want that ability to skip tiles and find exactly what I need. So I'm really, really trying not to spend money as much as I can early on. And then secondly, I would say any opportunity that you get to acquire bombs, you should do it. Like if it's buying them in the marketplace, there's some interesting tiles where it's kind of like the cloister from Carcassonne, that if it's surrounded by tiles, it is valuable. It'll do something for you.
Variations on this. I think there's like a statue that gives you bridges, and I forget. And there's others that like give you a payoff if they're next to something, like a workshop. If you put it next to 2 water tiles, I think gives you some.
Yeah. Here's something that I didn't realize for a while. So like the statue, if it's surrounded by, if every connecting square is being touched by a tile, then you get, I think it's 3 bridges. Water tiles count for that counting, which I did not realize for quite a while. So you can get a little bit of benefit if you've really racked up a bunch of water tiles in a certain area, which generally are just in the way. They at least count towards this, so you can have some strategy around that.
This is another big benefit to kind of trying to build the spiral, because if you're doing that, you will almost certainly naturally leave a few little gaps that you can drop stuff like that into, drop tiles into, whether it be towers or other special things. And the other tip I would say is like, as you get that ability by getting enough gold to have a little bit more choice over what towers you're going to be, or what tiles I should say you're laying, the towers are the most valuable thing. Like that should be a little obvious, but it definitely is worth mentioning. Early on, I tended to like try and build my road out ahead. So I was like, okay, well, I'm all set. I've got my road nice and far out in front of me. The better strategy for me ultimately was to be skipping the road tiles if they weren't perfect. And at using my skips to get to those damaging towers. Like if you skip a tower that could be on your field, like throwing arrows around, like you're hurting yourself a lot.
Yeah, because it might be 5, 6, 7, 8 tiles before you get another tower. And whether you can afford that or not, who knows? And you might have to deal with a couple waves before you could get to those. And every wave has a possibility of destroying you. Early on, there's a good combo though. There's traps, which do a number of things to the roads, and there's an ice trap which slows down your enemies. Pairing that with a cannon tower can be really effective, because the ice trap will group up the enemies, and then the cannon tower does sort of a splash damage. So there is some grouping of damage types that you can do to really maximize their effectiveness. There's not a ton of that. There's not like too many combos that you're really trying to build on your road. It's mostly about just building as long a road as you can that has as much damage on it as many damage points on it as it can. But there are some combos that you can put together, some more effective things.
There are definitely several kinds of tower that get stronger based on things that are adjacent to them. And I found those really fun to try and lay down. Like there's one that gets stronger if you get there's I think it's called a chain tower, where just having multiples of this side by side, they'll all deal more damage. And some of my best runs had good uses of that. And I think there's a tower that does more damage depending on how many garden tiles you have near it, things like that.
Yeah, I like the geyser tower, which starts out only attacking on its 4 adjacent squares, so just 4 spots. But for every water tile it's connected to, it extends that. So you can end up having it really have some good range. And also, we've said it a couple times, but like, this game is beautiful. This little geyser tower, for every water tower that, or water tile that it's connected to, a little like aqueduct comes out of the tower and goes down into the water tile, and really sort of completes the combo. There's a fishing hut that when you place it, if it's connected to a water tile, you get some gold.
A couple of gold, yeah.
When you place it, it builds a little dock out onto the water tile, and symbolizes the combo that it's doing. It just like really, these tiles all connect to each other in a way that's really, really satisfying. And also, when you place them, they like drop down, and it's like a thump. And there's just some real good tactile elements to this game that I really enjoyed.
I had one other thing that I thought was really a nice touch, and that was called the Legacy Tower. In a game like this, where the initial position does kind of matter, and there is some variety to it, and so there's slightly some starting positions that are better than others. If you have just started the game after having played it without like re-rolling your starting position, you will always get this additional tower that's just one extra tower for the start of your next round. And I thought that was really smart. It was often a very good strategy to build towards it and really make it part of your initial setup, and gave you a reason to not have the same opening every time.
It is a stronger tower than the normal arrow tower, so you benefit from having it. What it is if you make it to wave 20 on your previous run,
okay,
you get that. So you do have to make it to 20 to get it. But yeah, it prevents you from just spawning restarts spamming restarts until you get like an optimal start. Because I think that tower, the Legacy Tower, is it makes the early game significantly smoother for you.
Yeah, you can really play off of having that early boost. I would tend to when I would start a level, I would spend pretty much all of the initial gold, depending on which tiles I had available, and I would use that to lay down like a couple of tiles, a few good tiles, like even before the first wave, is often enough to get you through like 5 waves,
right?
And after doing that, you'll have saved money, and I tended to come out of that situation better than if I had just been very, very picky and choosy. So you can really experiment with it. The opening elements of this game are really fun. Like this, it's fun to figure out those first few tiles.
Yeah, I think you start pretty proactive the first 5-6 waves. You're kind of ahead of the curve. And then after that, it's just purely reaction the whole time. Like, oh no, they're getting too close in section B. I need to reinforce that one. Great. Okay, we survived the wave. Oh no, section C has popped up and I'm behind on that one. So sweet, I got a cannon tower. I'm going to put it over here. Oh no, now back in section A and we're falling apart. I got to put my new ballista tower or whatever. Do you have a favorite tower or favorite like trap?
No, I think I love all my children. I do want to talk about the 4 campaigns and the 5 guilds. I think discovering and finding out what the towers are is kind of part of the fun. And I don't think it makes for particularly great radio for me to just say, well, I really like the loop tower that shoots in a 9-box pattern all around it or whatever.
You're saying it now, though, and I'm going to say Boulder Tower for life. All right.
Yeah, you're right. The Boulder Tower is absolutely the best. Boulder Tower for the absolute win. The placement is key, but the effect is undeniably awesome.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. But yeah, I think that really the last thing we have to talk about with this game is the various modes and campaigns, which is really, really fun and really expands on the game. And I also makes it pretty ripe for new content down the line. So I'm hopeful that this game has some success, because there's about a million things that he could do to continue to evolve this game.
Yeah, I think he has already done so. The opening campaign is called The Training Grounds, and it's really just a is really essentially just a tutorial. That was a fairly late edition. This game came out in September, and I think it was out for a month or so before he added the Training Grounds. So this is a good time to get into it. It still has a steep learning curve, but I definitely found it approachable with that. The second campaign is The Archer's Oath, and each of the different campaigns has a different set of tiles that you're going to be placing. And so that's the main difference. The Archer's Oath is the first one, and it has primarily archery towers, as you might guess. The second one is the Arboretum, where it says, studying the vast castle gardens, bone-weary botanists keep the secrets to an impenetrable island defense. And this one has the addition of the garden, which is a useless tile, but that has some placement synergies, as well as a lot of kind of variations on the different towers. Things like poison are introduced. And then the final one is Burning Embers. And in Burning Embers, there's a lot of fire stuff going on. There's a lot of things that hit large areas in that, which I really appreciate. And so along with each of these different set of, subtly different towers, there are a lot of really unique things, like the relics are fun. There's a relic, and a relic example would be explosives. It says cannon tower splash damage range is increased by 1 tile, and you get maybe 2 relics in a run, and it's a good way to add variety to the runs.
Yeah.
And for each of these, you get to choose one of the guilds, and the guilds, there are 5 guilds, I think, and they change the game significantly. The default guild, I only beat each of the levels with the first default guild, which is just called Founders. And when you're playing with Founders, you gain a heart for every 10 waves, which is nice when you are, letting a few stragglers sneak through. But there are several others. Did you have a favorite one? Did you play around with these?
I did. So I beat all of them with the Founders Guild, like you did, and then I beat most of the Archers Guild or Archer's Oath with all of them. Though I really like, there's the Architects Guild, where you no longer have flags, and you get a bridge at the end of every wave. So you're not actually expanding the island at all. You're just building off of everything on bridges, and it ends with this really tight little map that I really found enjoyable and an interesting challenge. And there's the Cannoneers Guild that I played a little bit with, where you no longer can gain hearts or bridges. Every time you would gain one of those, you get cannons, or rather, bombs. So bombs, which are one of the most valuable resource, you have a ton of them. So you can shape and mold your map really however you want, but you are not going to gain health. So every time you take a point of damage, it's final. So it's an interesting challenge. The one that drove me crazy and made me put down the game for a minute because I could not beat it was I was trying to win with the Merchant Guild, which they do not acquire money through completing waves. They just acquire money by picking it up on the map, which is building a tile on top of a little money bag. And basically it makes money incredibly scarce. And I found that I'm pretty reliant on it. Apparently, by the middle end of the game, I'm skipping all the time, just burning money, skipping tiles. And when you can't do that, like, it's really, really challenging.
Each of these is a huge change to the economy of the game, which is already super tight.
Yeah. So I really, the Architects Guild was fun though. And it's between the 3 different campaigns and then the 5 different guilds, it is like 15 different games, you know? So I assume there's going to be more campaigns and more guilds, assuming this game is successful. So I think we've covered just about everything with this game. I mean, I think you and I could just riff on strategy and favorite towers and sections and whatnot. But I think we're probably good for now. I'd say this is a full-on recommendation. I'm always looking for good little games to play on my phone. I had some traveling over the weekend, and it was great. This was like the perfect car game.
Absolutely.
You know, and could be played completely offline as well. So highly recommend this game. Again, it's on iOS, Google Play, and Steam. Shane, any last notes on this game?
No, I just really enjoyed it. I'm glad we checked it out.
Cool. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. If you would like to see all of our different episodes and maybe leave us a note, you can do that at our website at theshortgame.net. We have a contact form there. Consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/theshortgame. We're always having a great time in the Discord. And you can follow the show on Twitter at _shortgame. You can follow me on Twitter at NateSTL. And Shane, where can people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at 8BitShane.
All right, and that'll do it for this week's episode of The Short Game. Thanks, everyone. Bye.